How's it going, everybody? Too Spooky here, and with Terrifier 3 dropping in theaters soon, I figured it was about time we counted down 10 facts about Art the Clown. Art has taken the horror genre by storm and solidified his place as one of the new icons of horror. So in this video, we're taking a look at his origins, the inspirations for his conception, and much, much more. This video does contain minor spoilers for Terrifier 1 and 2, so this is your official spoiler warning if you have yet to watch the films. Without any more delay, let's jump right into it. Number 1. The creator and director for the Terrifier films, Damien Leone, first came up with the concept for Art by envisioning a woman getting off of work late at night and needing to take a bus home, where across from her sits a clown, who begins taunting her. Envisioning the clown as both uncomfortable and comedic, before becoming intimidating and aggressive. This idea would then be introduced in Damien's directorial debut, The Ninth Circle from 2008, where instead of a bus, he has Art sitting across from a woman waiting for the train, where he begins to taunt her before drugging her. The only thing is, Art is more of a background character rather than the main focus, as the entire concept for the Ninth Circle was to illustrate the Ninth Circle of Hell from Dante's Inferno. With Damien going on to comment, "I threw in everything. Clowns, witches, demons, monsters, everything up against the wall hoping something would stick, even putting in Satan himself." Following the release of the Ninth Circle, multiple people would start asking Damien about Art the Clown, expressing that they wanted to see more of him, which led to Art being the centerpiece of Damien's follow-up short film in 2011, titled Terrifier, which follows Art as he stalks and terrorizes a costume designer that witnessed one of his murders. This was also notably the first big change for Art's appearance, as in the Ninth Circle, the makeup and exaggerated facial features were much less prominent. But in the Terrifier short, Damien wanted Art to look much more inhuman, like a zombie, which would be the look that Art would become popular for. At the time of the Terrifier short film's release, Damien was having a lot of trouble getting it shown at film festivals, as it was getting rejected left and right. So he ended up just releasing it on YouTube, which would end up being a godsend, as it got remotely popular and accumulated 120,000 views, which got the attention of producer Jesse Baguette, who was looking to make a Halloween-based anthology film, and was searching YouTube for possible shorts to include, being blown away by Terrifier after finding it, to which he immediately got in contact with Damien about including it. As a little side note, remember back when you could upload something like the Terrifier short to YouTube and not get demonetized? We didn't know how good we had it, man. Damien saw this as an opportunity to get Art his own feature film, and ended up convincing Jesse to let him direct all of the shorts in the anthology. And this is how 2013's All Hallows Eve would officially put Art on the map for a wider audience, which featured the two previous short films, a new one involving a random alien, and an overarching plot of a babysitter watching two kids as they discover a mysterious videotape in their Halloween candy. Following the release of All Hallows Eve, Damien was ready to take Art to the next level, and began writing what would become 2016's Terrifier, as he believed the 2010s were lacking an iconic horror villain, unlike the previous decades, and also wanted an excuse to really show off his practical effects work, eventually deciding to make an Indiegogo campaign asking for the low cost of $35,000 to make the film happen. Unfortunately, the Indiegogo campaign didn't meet its mark, and it looked like Terrifier wasn't going to happen. That is, until filmmaker and producer Phil Falcone received an email notifying him about the Terrifier campaign, going on to contact Damien about how much money he needed for the film, agreeing to finance it completely, so long as he got a producer credit, which completely saved the film. Terrifier would then release in 2016 and become a financial success, pushing Art into the mainstream as a new horror icon. While Art was receiving his praises from the film, other critics noted that the side characters were extremely lackluster, which Damien would go on to regret not fleshing them out, especially Victoria Hayes, who would end up having a more prominent role in future films. After Terrifier's success, Damien would approach Terrifier 2 a bit differently, as when he first completed The Ninth Circle, he had the idea for a film concept that centered around a heroine dressed as an angel, but this idea would quickly fall apart and he abandoned it. However, after his regrets of not fleshing out the side characters in the first Terrifier, he decided to bring this idea back for the sequel by making it much more character-driven, notably by creating an adversary for Art, akin to creating the Batman to his Joker, which would become the basis for Sienna in Terrifier 2, as the angel-dressed heroine idea made its return. With much more ambition put into Terrifier 2 as a whole, Damien obviously needed more money to make it happen. First, securing funds from private investors, before launching another Indiegogo campaign asking for $50,000 to finance some of the major practical effects scenes. Unlike the first Terrifier, this campaign would be a massive success, as it reached over $250,000, 5 times more than the initial goal, meaning Damien could make Terrifier 2 even crazier than he initially intended, which is exactly what he did. Following a few delays due to the pandemic, Terrifier 2 would officially release in late 2022 and instantly become a critical and financial success, bringing in $15.7 million at the box office and staying in theaters much longer than originally planned, cementing Art as a pop culture and horror icon. Which leads us to the present, with Terrifier 3 releasing on October 11th of 2024, this time with a much higher budget of $2 million. It's expected to be much crazier than the previous installments. While the movie obviously hasn't released at the time of making this video, the film will be taking place around the Christmas holiday season, with Sienna, Victoria, and of course Art the Clown, all reprising their roles as Art goes on a festive massacre. Number 2. When it comes to Art's conception as a clown, Damien took multiple inspirations. Appearance-wise, he was based off of the clown from the Twilight Zone episode 5 Characters in Search of an Exit. But Damien's decision to make Art a clown in the first place was because he felt there wasn't really a prominent clown character in the horror scene, outside of Pennywise from It. But even then, Art was also constructed to be the antithesis of Pennywise. Art is black and white, Pennywise is colorful. Art doesn't speak, Pennywise does. Art is bald. Bald! Bald! And Pennywise has hair, etc. Additionally, Art's violent nature was born from Damien's love for the exploitation that was present in 70s grindhouse films, meant to be an authentic and brutal serial killer, unlike the ancient supernatural monster that is Pennywise. Further commenting that, I felt like there was a void with clowns, that I hadn't quite seen done the way I felt like I could execute one. Art the Clown kind of came out of all that, and whatever I felt was missing with clowns. At the time, the original Pennywise was really the only clown on the scene, and he wasn't even really a slasher. So Art was constructed out of necessity for a killer clown unlike anything audiences had ever seen before. Number 3. To add on to the last fact a little bit, it's a bit up in the air as to whether or not Art is actually considered supernatural. And from my research on the matter, I think I've come to a conclusion to set that record straight. With his first appearance in the Ninth Circle, it was heavily implied that Art was some sort of supernatural creature, but considering every supernatural being under the sun was present in that short, this is not a surprise. This implied supernatural undertone would also continue over to the Terrifier short, and the overarching story of All Hallows Eve. But when it finally came to the first Terrifier movie, this is where Damien decided that Art was just going to be a completely psychotic killer with no supernatural abilities whatsoever.
He is literally just a guy! Hit him with your car!
Even commenting in an interview that when Art shot himself in the face at the end of the first movie, he had no idea he would come back to life. So when he woke up revived in the morgue from an unknown entity, it was a complete surprise. So with that understood, Art himself isn't supernatural. Instead, he is the subject of a separate supernatural force, with Damien going on to say, in most of these slasher franchises, the killer usually winds up getting killed, and then he's supernatural. But the filmmakers just gloss over it. And in regards to Terrifier 2, I wanted to really explore that supernatural evil as a character, and it actually is a physical apparition in this film that luckily we really haven't spoiled yet. So rather than making Art himself some sort of supernatural zombie creature like Jason from Friday the 13th, he wanted Art to be a normal human that is brought back from a supernatural entity, with that entity having its own focus, which would end up being known as the Little Pale Girl within Terrifier 2. Her origin is still a mystery at this time, and maybe Terrifier 3 will shed some more light on her origins, but a popular theory presented by CZ's World shows that Art had previously murdered a 10-year-old girl at the local carnival, sometime prior to the events of the first Terrifier film, whose name was Emily. And back in the first Terrifier movie, the lady with the plastic baby doll claimed that the doll's name was Emily.
This is my daughter, Emily. Say hello to the pretty young lady.
Perhaps meaning that this lady lost her daughter to Art in the past unknowingly, and now Emily is back as some sort of supernatural being with the power to bring the dead back to life, and ultimately helping Art commit his atrocities to boot. Let me know in the comments what you guys think, and hopefully within Terrifier 3, we'll get some answers. Number 4. Art's wide variety of weapons was chosen as a way to make him extremely unpredictable, and also break the stereotypes of horror slashers, as typically, horror slasher villains only use one or a few different weapons, and most notably, never use firearms. Whereas Art not only carries an entire garbage bag full of weapons, but through his use of things like a chain of sharp instruments, in a makeshift cat o' nine tails that even includes his victim's hair, bottles of acid, syringes, meat cleavers, salt, and various firearms, it truly makes him one of a kind in the slasher scene, as you can never guess what he's going to do next. Number 5. Art was initially portrayed by Mike Giannelli in The Ninth Circle, The Terrifier short, and in All Hallows Eve, getting the role as a personal friend of Damien's who he'd worked with in the past, as Damien wanted to find someone who was comfortable wearing a bunch of makeup and prosthetics for extended periods of time, which Mike was more than happy to do when portraying Art was only supposed to be a small role. Because although it should be noted that Mike wasn't an actor, he made sure to put his all into the role, which developed all of Art's mannerisms for future films. Mike was offered to reprise his role of Art in Terrifier, but he decided to retire from acting altogether and pass on it, as he would later comment in various interviews that acting just wasn't for him. He disliked the whole process of applying and removing makeup for hours at a time, filming in the cold, and dealing with gross things like pig guts. Further commenting that Art was originally going to have white or red eyes, but the contact lenses were so uncomfortable and kept popping out, so Damien scrapped that idea altogether.
Sienna!
Yeah?
Why does Art have the f***ing Sharingan?!
お前はどこまで見えている万華鏡車輪眼
Mike is obviously the backbone for what Art would become, as playing Art are his only acting credits. But the actor who now portrays Art would take the character to a completely different level. That being, the actor David Howard Thornton. David was the 6th person to audition for the role of Art following Mike's departure, and he ended up getting the role based on his improvisation during the audition, as he improvised a kill scene where Art began tasting the victim's blood before seasoning it with salt. David would go on to study Mike's performance as Art to match his energy, while also bringing his own mischievous and sadistic essence to the character to make it his own, which is evident through his incredible facial expressions alone. David also had previous experience as a mime, and was inspired by other silent physical actors such as Buster Keaton, Lon Chaney, Doug Jones, Jim Carrey, and Charlie Chaplin, going on to describe his interpretation of Art as an evil Mr. Bean, further saying, "I understand the character and can turn it on and off at a rapid pace. As soon as the character is living in my head, I can just access it. I greatly appreciate silent film actors and physical comedians, and that's what I pulled a lot from since my character doesn't talk. I had to learn other ways to convey my voice. I basically blended my previous experience with physical comedy and clowning with my deep knowledge and appreciation of great physical actors, and horror legends like Robert Englund, and added them to what Mike had already accomplished to create this murderous frappe of fiendishness that is Art the Clown. In my head, Art is like the love child of Harpo Marx and Freddy Kruger. I love playing him." Damien would also go on to comment about how great David is at playing Art, saying, "Mike may as well have been a guy dressed as a clown, whereas David is a clown. If you know him in person, he is a walking cartoon. He is Roger Rabbit in real life, and you'd never believe that he's Art the Clown, but he knows how to flip the switch and bring it to a dark place." Since he is now the embodiment of Art the Clown, it's no surprise that David is reprising the role for Terrifier 3.
Number 6.
Since we've spoken about Art's antithesis to Pennywise, it should also be noted that Stephen King is a fan of the Terrifier movies, as he's tweeted about both Terrifier 1 and 2, and how they gross you out old school, giving them his seal of approval. This quote of his would also end up on the Blu-ray and DVD releases of the film. Number 7. Art has also been featured in his own comic book series, which spans 3 issues and retells the events of the first Terrifier movie, illustrated by horror artist Steve McGuinness. These comics were only produced as a limited run, with a few variant covers, immediately making them a collector's item once Terrifier 2 broke into the mainstream. As far as other collector's items, Art is also getting his very own popcorn bucket for the release of Terrifier 3. Additionally, because I don't know where else to throw it in this video, Art made a cameo in Pete Davidson's TV show, Bupkis. Do with this information what you will. Number 8. Art's legacy as a newly appointed cultural icon has also bled over into the world of video games, as in the brutally unforgiving game, Fear and Hunger 2, Termina. As one of the most dangerous enemies present in that game is a clown directly based on Art, named Needles. Not only is Needles' appearance a direct reference to Art, but Needles' behavior and choice of weapons were taken from the signature clown as well, as Needles not only uses sedatives and drugs via syringes, but he also wields a makeshift whip of sharp objects, just like Art from the films. If that wasn't enough, if you manage to remove one of Needles' arms, he'll pull a gun on you with his remaining free hand, just like Art uses firearms in the films. So as a little tip, if you ever play Fear and Hunger 2, always make sure you take out both of Needles' arms at once. Additionally, Needles is the only enemy in the game that will follow you to different locations, trying to hunt you down and murder you and other characters in different horrific ways, which is very reminiscent of how Art stalks his victims in the original Terrifier short. Outside of that, Art is also being featured as a playable operator in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 and Warzone, alongside other horror icons like Sam from Trick or Treat and Michael Myers from Halloween. Seeing Art start to collaborate with games, I'm really hoping he ends up being a guest character in a future Mortal Kombat installment, because he would be a perfect fit, especially because there's been so many horror characters guest starring already. I mean, just imagine how brutal Art's fatalities would be. Number 9. When it comes to the post-credit scene in Terrifier 2, where Victoria gave birth to Art's head, that sequence was originally going to be a bit different, as rather than Victoria birthing Art, Art would have grown out of the back of her head. However, in the process of making the film, Damien saw 2021's Malignant, and realized the concept of Art growing from Victoria's head would have been too similar to a scene in that film, and therefore wanted to avoid any comparison. In hindsight, he's also very happy he went that opposite direction, as in his original idea, Victoria would have been killed from Art growing out of her, and by instead keeping her alive with the birth, he was able to go forward with his plans to make Victoria a much more important character in Terrifier 3. And finally, number 10. For the final fact, it should be known that Art will terrorize his victims again after Terrifier 3, as Damien has spoke in past interviews about the possibility of Terrifier 4 already being a thing, and recently even confirmed Terrifier 4 at the premiere for Part 3, as his plans for the third installment were getting so big that he started planning for a fourth film as well. And with the series' continued critical success, it was already unlikely that Terrifier 3 was going to mark the end of Art. The only thing is, Terrifier 4 might end up being the last, because while commenting on the future of the franchise, Damien also made sure to state that he wanted to be very careful with too many sequels going forward, stating that, "My fear is that eventually the well is gonna run dry. We're gonna end up jumping the shark, and there will be nothing left to say with this character. I've watched all these Part 10s and Part 13s, but sometimes that can really ruin the franchise. I want to try and avoid that. So while we very likely won't be seeing Art Goes to Hell or Art X in the future, which is probably for the better anyway, we can expect at least one more massacre from this clown before he takes his leave." As one quick little bonus fact, while making this video, Damien commented in an interview that out of every prominent horror slasher, Freddy Kruger would be the one he'd want to see most in a movie with Art, whether that be as some sort of team-up or a Freddy vs. Jason situation. His reason being that he thinks Art and Freddy share a very similar sense of humor, and would make a great matchup because of that. This likely won't ever happen, but on the off chance it does, you heard it here first. But there you have it everybody, 10 facts about Art the Clown. Hopefully you enjoyed the video and learned something new. If you did, make sure to drop a like. While you're at it, be sure to comment which horror icon you'd like to learn about next, and subscribe with those notifications on so you don't miss it. I've got a couple other projects cooking up for the spooky season, even though it's spooky year-round for me, so be sure to stay tuned. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all soon with the next video.